February 1945. A small town called Werndorf, outside Kassel, Germany. Patton's Third Army rolled in at 0800. Standard procedure: secure the perimeter, clear the buildings, find the local authority. Take the census records, identify potential threats. Private Roy Daniels was assigned to the town hall. 2 other soldiers with him. Routine work. The ground floor was empty. Desks, filing cabinets, the quiet disorder of an office that had been working until recently and then stopped suddenly. Daniels went downstairs. The basement was not empty. There were people in it. 43 people, men, women, children, thin, pale, clearly having been underground for some time. They looked at Daniels with the particular expression of people who have spent a long time not knowing what would come through the next door. Daniels did not know what he was looking at yet. He would understand later. For now he called for his sergeant. His sergeant called for the intelligence officer. The intelligence officer called for the translator. And then they all started to understand what had been happening in the basement of the Werndorf town hall for the previous 14 months. By afternoon, the report was moving up the chain. By evening, it was on its way to Patton. And the question it carried was one nobody had a clean answer to. The man who had done this, the mayor of Werndorf, Ernst Kaufmann, 60 years old, a member of the party since 1933, a collaborator by every official definition. He was also the reason 43 people were alive. What do you do with a man like that? Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories where the hardest questions don't have easy answers, and we don't pretend they do. Ernst Kaufmann had been mayor of Werndorf for 11 years. He had joined the party because it was expected, because refusing had consequences, because in 1933 the machinery of the state made certain choices very simple by making the alternative very dangerous. He had administered his town. He had attended the meetings. He had signed the documents that were put in front of him. He had also, quietly over 14 months, falsified the town's official records in ways that would not be noticed until someone looked very carefully. The intelligence officer, Lieutenant Aaron Cole, spent 3 hours in Kaufmann's office with a translator going through the files. What he found was meticulous. Kaufmann had been precise about it, almost scholarly. The falsifications were not crude. They were the work of a man who understood bureaucracy well enough to manipulate it invisibly. 31 Jewish residents of Werndorf, who had been scheduled for forced deportation over the previous 14 months, had been officially recorded as already transferred, deceased, or relocated. On paper, they no longer existed in Werndorf. They could not be deported from a place they were not recorded as living. 12 more had been hidden under false occupational classifications. Listed as essential workers in industries that entitled them to deferment, the 43 people in the basement were the ones who had required more direct protection, the ones whose situations couldn't be resolved on paper. Kaufmann had been hiding them personally in the town hall basement, rotating food and supplies through a network of 3 other townspeople who knew. One of those 3 had been arrested 6 months earlier for an unrelated matter. He had not, under interrogation, revealed what he knew. He had spent 4 months in a regional detention facility and was released 2 weeks before the Americans arrived. He had walked straight back to Werndorf and resumed his role in the supply rotation without saying a word about what had happened to him. Cole wrote all of this in his preliminary report. Then he added a section at the end that was unusual for a military intelligence document. He wrote, "The subject, Mayor Ernst Kaufmann, is by official classification a party member and collaborator. He has administered this town under the occupation government and signed documents consistent with that government's policies. He is, by the standards applied to other similar officials in liberated territories, subject to arrest and prosecution." He also wrote, "By my count, his actions directly preserved the lives of a minimum of 43 individuals. The actual number may be higher, as the falsified records may account for individuals no longer in the region. He wrote, "I do not know how to categorize this man. I am sending it up the chain and asking for guidance." It was the second time in 2 months he had written that exact sentence. Patton read Cole's report that evening. He read it twice. Then he called Davenport in and had him read it. Davenport read it carefully. He set it down. He said, "What are you going to do?" Patton said, "I don't know yet. That's why I'm going down there." Davenport said, "Sir, the standard procedure for collaborators." Patton said, "I know what the standard procedure is." He picked up the report again. He looked at the section where Cole had listed the falsifications, the precision of them. 14 months. 31 people made invisible on paper, 12 reclassified, 43 hidden in person, 1 member of the network arrested and tortured and released without talking. He put the report down. He said, "Get me the Jeep." Patton arrived in Verndorf the following morning. Cole met him at the town hall entrance. He walked him through the building, the ground floor offices, the basement where the 43 people had been. They were being housed now in requisitioned buildings above ground, assessed by military medical personnel, fed. Patton stopped in the empty basement. He looked at the space, a low ceiling, no windows, blankets folded in a corner recently vacated, the smell of many people in a confined space for a long time. He stood there for a moment. Then he said, "Where is Kaufman?" Kaufman was being held in a room on the 2nd floor. Cole had kept him separated, waiting for instructions. Patton went up. Kaufman was 60 years old and looked older. Thin, gray, wearing the plain suit of a small-town official. He stood when Patton entered. Not at attention. Just the ordinary courtesy of someone who does not know what is coming and is trying to maintain some dignity while he waits for it. Patton sat down. He told Kaufman to sit. The translator, a German-American corporal named Fischer, stood to the side. Patton said, "Tell me when you started," Kaufman told him. He did not embellish and he did not minimize. He described the first deportation order that had come through in December 1943. The names on it, men he had known for years. He described the night he sat at his desk after everyone had gone home and understood that he was going to sign the document or he was going to find another way. He said he didn't make the decision heroically. He said he made it because he could not make the other one. That signing the document had become physically impossible for him in a way he could not fully explain. Fischer translated carefully. Patton said, "You were a party member." Kaufman said, "Yes." Patton said, "You signed other documents." Kaufman said, "Yes." Patton said, "You administered this town under the occupation government for 11 years. Kaufman said, "Yes." Patton said, "And for the last 14 months you were also doing this." Kaufman said, "Yes." Patton said, "Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you refuse openly? Why didn't you do something more visible?" Kaufman was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Because visible resistance dies quickly and takes others with it. I had seen that. I was not brave enough for visible resistance. I was only brave enough for invisible resistance. The falsified records, the basement, things that could be maintained as long as nobody looked too closely. I calculated that invisible and sustained would save more people than visible and brief. I may have been wrong. I have thought about it many times." Patton said, "Were you afraid?" Kaufman said, "Every day for 14 months. Patton said, "The man who was arrested, the one who didn't talk." Kaufman said, "Heinrich Brandt, he is a baker." He said afterward that he decided before they arrested him that he would not speak, that the decision was easier once it was already made. He is a braver man than I am." Patton looked at Kaufman for a long time. Then he said, I have been in 2 world wars. I have seen collaboration, and I have seen resistance, and I have seen every gradation between them. I have seen men do terrible things for understandable reasons and good things for complicated ones. You are not a simple case. I am not going to pretend you are. Kaufman waited. Patton said, "You are going to be processed. Your membership and your record as administrator will be reviewed by the denazification board. That process exists, and I am not going to circumvent it. What happened in this building will be part of your record. Both things, all of it." He paused and he said, "I am going to make sure the people in that basement are asked to give testimony. Their testimony will go into the record alongside everything else. What the board does with the full picture is the board's decision, not mine." Kaufman said, "And if the board decides the membership outweighs the basement?" Patton looked at him. He said, "Then that will be unjust, but it will be the board's injustice, not mine. The alternative is that I decide unilaterally which collaborators get to walk free based on what they did in private, and that is a door I will not open. Because the next man through it will be someone who deserves to be on the other side of it." He stood up. He said, "You did something that cost you 14 months of fear and could have cost you everything. I understand what that was. I am not pretending it was nothing." He walked to the door. He stopped. He said, "Fisher, translate this exactly." He said, "The 43 people in that basement are alive. That is a fact that exists independent of every other fact about you. Nobody can take it from the record. Whatever else is true, that is true. I hope it counts for something when the time comes." And he walked out. The denazification board reviewed Ernst Kaufmann's case in late 1945. The testimony of the 43 was entered into the record. 12 more individuals whose deportations had been falsified came forward after liberation and confirmed Kaufmann's account. The total number of people directly protected by his actions was eventually documented at 61. The board deliberated for 3 weeks. Their finding was unusual. They classified Kaufman as a collaborator, which was accurate by definition, and simultaneously recorded his actions as constituting significant resistance activity, which was also accurate. The 2 classifications sat in the same file, unresolved because the board could find no existing category that contained both things. He was not imprisoned. He was removed from public office permanently, which he had expected. He was prohibited from holding any administrative position, which he had also expected. He went back to Werndorf. He lived there for the rest of his life. He ran a small bookshop for 22 years. Heinrich Brandt, the baker who had not spoken under interrogation, became something of a local figure in Werndorf after the war. People knew what he had done. He was not comfortable with the attention. When people called him a hero, he said, "I made a decision before they arrested me. After that, it was just endurance." The decision was the hard part. Endurance is only time. Cole, who had written both preliminary reports, Kaufmann's and Thomas Auer, the medics, gave a long interview to a military historian in 1976. The historian asked him if he ever found out what happened to the people from the basement. Cole said most of them eventually made their way to family members in other regions or emigrated in the post-war years. A few stayed in Werndorf. One family stayed in the town for 3 generations. Their grandchildren still lived there when Cole gave the interview. The historian asked him what he thought of Kaufman. Cole thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "He was a collaborator who saved 61 people. Both of those things are true and they don't cancel each other out. The board couldn't resolve it. I couldn't resolve it. I'm not sure it can be resolved. Some situations are genuinely 2 things at once, and the honest answer is to hold both instead of choosing one." He paused. He said Patton understood that. When he came down to Werndorf, he didn't try to make it simple. He let it be what it was. Two things at once. He said what was true and he left the rest to the process. He shook his head. He said, most people, when something is two things at once, pick the one that makes them more comfortable. Patton picked the one that was more honest. That was the difference. What do you think of Ernst Kaufmann, hero or collaborator? Or is that the wrong question entirely? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories, the ones where the honest answer is harder than either side wants to admit, make sure you subscribe.